I still think of, when I think of a traditional classroom, I think of like the 1950s model of classrooms. You know, everybody's all in a row. The discipline was probably still, you could get paddled in front of the class.
Yeah.
Or sent to the principal's office and paddled. Like they were.
Thinking of teachers hitting kids with rulers and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even when I was in elementary school, there was somewhat of a threat that you could maybe go and get spanked at the principal's office.
Yeah. Well, they're just stuck in habits too. They'll play the same PowerPoint every semester, every year.
And they
Be lucky
say,
if they switch up the test.
if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yep.
That's sort of the mentality instead of.
But it is broken. That's the point.
And then the assessments are really sort of out of date as well. What would be a better way to assess us? The evidence of learning, where we're sort of focused on one task, or if we had tests that were like multiple choice and it's like, can you name Vito's 5 standards and write about them or whatever? I'm just like, are you testing me on my memorization or like a really in-depth
how do I understand this
understanding of the
material?
topic?
Yeah.
Right. So I feel that like those multiple choice short answer sort of assessments are good for some, bad for others, people with test anxiety and whatnot. I just don't feel that with that to me is tradition. I think that in a traditional classroom, the focus tends to be on a collective. Whereas in a transformed classroom, like even though you're never neglecting that whole collective, and of course that's who you want to benefit, but there's also some additional emphasis placed on individual instruction as well. So the group reflects the need for the activity.
You have your community in your classroom, but you also have the communities that all of your kids come from. And I feel like in the traditional classroom, those communities aren't taken into account. Whereas in...
Yeah, no one ever really cared to think how that could even impact a classroom. I think that it's important for teachers to sort of live where they work in a way. I don't know if everybody can get on board with that or if it necessarily is applied to a transformed classroom, but yeah, I personally think that there's something important to that because
you're experiencing what they're experiencing.
Yeah.
You're living what they're living.
I would say that first, you really need to understand what some possible challenges or even advantages that each of your students may possess based on their culture. The language that they use is a very important tool. Is sort of it can be a link and a bond between you. If you understand what some of these either linguistic challenge or assets are, and you can utilize those in the classroom, I think it builds a great level of trust between you and the students, because now you've connected. But if you can just make one little comment to one student just because you know something about their culture, you just created like a little spark that says and tells that kid, well, this is someone who cares about me because they just asked me about fill in the blank for whatever cultural, something that might be important to them.
Yeah.
But they've said something in their writing, and all you do is just go find a little bit of research, keep your ear to the ground, and again, you're making a comment to them or any sort of thing that I think that the biggest emphasis and the result of doing these sort of things is that it builds trust between you and your students. I think just taking the time to ask instead of acting.
Yeah.
So asking instead of acting.
So making the culture about the student rather than about a group that the student belongs to.
Yeah, absolutely. Let them sort of govern that a bit.
Here are the steps to building cultural sensitivity. Step 1 is awareness. That's knowing that there are differences that everyone carries with them into a classroom, and these differences stem from having life experiences that are unique to their individual experiences. Step 2 is the acceptance and respect for cultural differences. Once you've become aware that everyone is unique, you can begin to accept and understand how one's culture shapes them, and then regard these distinctions with respect for one's background. Step 3 is having empathy for other cultures, and empathy is defined as the ability to understand and share the feelings of another, and in this case, another culture. In the classroom, this looks like showing students that you genuinely care about and value their unique life experiences. Some schools now have many students whose parents are refugees, and it can greatly benefit a teacher to understand what their students may have experienced in their lives before they started coming to school. Step 4 is developing enriching classroom experiences while considering the differences in evaluations. Now that the culturally sensitive teacher has a better understanding of the many different cultural backgrounds being represented in their classroom, they can begin to develop lessons and assessments that incorporate myriad cultural elements.
Everything is different. Everything is different. It's kind of irritating because people know you're from Africa. They say, "Oh, where are you from Africa?" Yes. Some people, they say, like, "Do you live in the forest?" Nobody's born in the forest. You can't live in the forest. You have to live in a house.
A positive relationship amongst anyone involved in the classroom is very important. Vito said that when teachers engage in a meaningful dialogue and talk with students about their interests, hopes, families, and opinions, it sends a strong message of caring and lets students know what he or she is important. And that leads to what the vision of a transformed classroom is. And that vision just affects the relationships because it's a student-centered approach. So in this classroom, the students are the center, the teachers in the background, letting the students run the lessons and teach it, and then it's less on the teacher. Well, this goes back to the funds of knowledge, and when a teacher starts the year off strong and digs deeper into the students' funds of knowledge by doing a cultural puzzle or figuring out about their culture, they can just deepen their knowledge. They can differentiate the lessons. They can use assessment to group students by seats or to in groups, or use that to know their culture and where they come from. And then just having a community presence in the classroom fosters that lifelong relationship between the teacher, the parents, the community, just making sure you get everyone. The hard thing we have is getting parents involved because they don't have a car to transport them, they don't have a babysitter, they don't speak English. So it's hard getting them to come in the day, and it's even hard getting them to come at night. My last school had literacy nights, and parents couldn't even come there because they didn't have transportation. So you can always go to their house and making sure they're getting involved, or conference nights they come and get involved. It's just making sure you touch base with each of those parents. Calling home, good reports is always good to get the parents involved. It's a new study basically, where the teachers, before they start school, the new school year, they will go to the home of the students and they will talk to the parent, get involved, let them know that they're welcome to come to school, help out. And it's proven that the success of that student has raised because the parent feels like they're part of that success.
And there to be an advocate for these kids that are misunderstood or that are seen as problem kids or disruptive or whatever. With this, like what we're talking about, building relationships with the parents that are positive from the beginning of the year, I think that you're able to mitigate more these sort of behavioral distractions in the classroom.
So once she came and sat down with us, I realized that like teacher, the word teacher sounds so intimidating to me it did. And after she came, it just opened up my eyes and I looked at it in a total different way. And I'm glad that she came, because then I know what she expects of my daughter and what I expect to go on at the school. So we're like kind of singing the same note and on the same page as far as raising my daughter so that she can be successful.
The first basic need that Vito points out is belonging. That's satisfied just through basic friendships with other people. The second is power, and that is having a sense of self-control in the classroom, controlling your own destiny. The second is freedom, and those two go together, in my opinion. You can't have one without the other. So if I'm giving you power, I also need to give you the freedom to express that power. The fourth is fun, because who wants to not have fun? I think that's a basic need in the
Are
classroom.
there any children who don't like fun?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, and
It's a commonality.
we can do a lot of
Everyone
things. We can teach our kids creatively. We can be funny in the classroom. I think that's really important, and it's overlooked a lot in education.
It's going to be tough for me.
The last need is just really basic. It's survival, and that is food, shelter, making sure that my basic physical needs are taken care of. That one is crucial to all the other ones, because you can have belonging, you can have power, you can have freedom, you can have fun, but if you can't survive, then, people are going in and trying to fulfill all 4 of these first needs without even thinking about the survival needs first,
Are they eating well at
Yeah,
home?
if a kid wakes up and comes to school and hasn't had breakfast,
Which happens a lot.
and then he or she comes to school and starts falling behind in the curriculum, the first thing that most teachers do is say, how can we fix this falling behind? To be an educator, you have to be a human first. And I think you have to have honesty, and you have to have integrity, and you have to have compassion for your students and for their families. There have always been people that are hungry. And when those people are our kids in our classrooms, then we have a moral responsibility to help them.
Pedro Noguera talks about moving from empathy to solidarity, right? And of course, that when you are empathetic to the suffering that's going on, then you have a certain understanding about it and a certain set of feelings about it. But when you are in solidarity with people who are suffering, in other words, as long as you are suffering, I am suffering. As long as you are hungry, I am hungry.
Staying consistent, having a routine is really important to build responsibility in children so that they know what to expect when they come to your classroom. Setting a common goal and then scaffolding them appropriately to get to that goal. But letting them in on the goal and having them even make a decision about that goal, that goes back to the freedom and power part of the student's needs that you're trying to fulfill as a teacher. And that also takes away the, why are we learning this? This is so boring, because they know that there's an end goal every time you tell them that. I think group learning is essential in the way that these needs are set up and the way that you want your classroom to be a cohesive unit. We talk in class a lot about scaffolding and making sure that our students are set up for success. And that just means giving them the appropriate background knowledge so that when we expect them to perform a goal, they're able to perform it based on the information that we've given them already. Getting to know your kids at the beginning of class is scaffolding for teachers. When you're sitting down and you're having a conversation with your students, you know that you've done your job. I think the same is true for ECE kids, it's the same for elementary kids, it's the same for middle school kids, and it's the same for high school kids. The conversations change based on the age, but that goal of having that conversation is the same. First of all, it builds a classroom community, bringing in different strengths from all of your different students. And the second thing it does is it meets the needs of the students that are, just beyond those basic survival needs, because that all comes into how the students are reacting to what you're teaching. So I think what it comes down to is using the community itself to create learning environments for your students. With that in mind, I think letting students choose their topic of interest, while it might not always be practical, it is always beneficial. And not only that, more importantly, it invests the community in the classroom, which eventually will change the school itself, which will eventually change the community.
What they did was every red tag is every 5 feet. So every 5 feet they will have one native plant. So this is just one of our projects that we have been doing here in Kala.
Altogether there is. It's hard, but it also has a huge effect on your classroom as a whole. I took a quote from Tharp that says, "Learners construct their own knowledge through their experiences with the material of the world, and by observing how that material responds to their attempt to manipulate and explain it."
Oh, that's great.
And I think as teachers, we need to strive to present our materials to students that are applicable to their lives, such as you just said about going to the community pond and cleaning that up. And that just gets them excited and thriving to learn. And it can be approached from many different angles depending on the grade level. But also, we need to be aware of the emotional needs of our students, and they come to our classroom, and our classroom needs to fit each student's needs. Whether that may be they come from a world of hurt and pain, or they just come to learn. But we need to be able to understand that. And then also, as urban teachers, we need to look at it from the CREED standards. When incorporating the CREED standards, the classroom will look like this. It has joint productive activity where the teachers and students are producing together. During this, the teacher will support student collaboration, they will design instructional activities, and they will arrange the classroom setting to accommodate students' individual and group needs. in order to work jointly together. The next point is language development, and this is where language and literacy across the curriculum happens. During this, the teacher will listen to students talk about their home and community, respond to students' questions, model written and oral language development, and connect students' language with content area knowledge through speaking, listening, reading, and writing. The next CREED standard is contextualization, where they make meaning of the lessons, where they connect it to the students' lives. The teacher begins lessons with the meaning students already have about their home and community. They design lessons that are meaningful to students' lives. They involve the knowledge of parents and family members. It is all community-based learning activities. The next CREED standard is challenging activities, where the teacher is teaching complex thinking. The teacher also makes sure students see the whole picture for understanding the lessons. They challenge the students' performance and advances students' understanding to higher levels. With this, the teacher gives clear, direct feedback about students' performance with the standards. The last standard is instructional conversation. The teacher is teaching through conversation. They arrange the classroom to accommodate conversations between the teacher and small groups. They have clear academic goals that guides the students' conversations, and they ensure all students are included in the conversation. So with all those 5 CREED standards, we can make the classroom designed to make that community whole. It's a guidance for teachers, schools, educators to follow that is good pedagogy, that is effective in learning. It kind of sums up and wraps up the idea of the transformed classroom. When a teacher is able to hit all of these points, in the end you have a classroom community that is just full of knowledge and all of that stuff.
The transformed classroom is a democratic classroom, if that makes sense. And what that means is that in a democratic society, power is given to the people because they have a voice. So they're able to make decisions and their voices are able to be heard. Give students power by giving them a voice.
Absolutely.
So we talked a little bit about earlier about students being able to choose lesson plans. That's one example of giving students a voice in the classroom. You're going to gain their respect because you respect them, and they're going to feel like they have power in the classroom, which is one of those basic needs that everyone has. Through instructional conversations, building relationships with your students. What makes it more memorable and what makes people learning more in the classroom is having the relationship with the students, right? And really listening. Vito talked about meaningful dialogue, and what he was basically talking about was I think as adults, we have a tendency when we talk to kids to sort of be condescending. The younger they get, the more condescending we are.
It's actually a challenge at elementary school.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah. And I think it's a challenge for high school teachers. The problem that teachers have is that we talk so much. Our job is to talk. That when the kids talk, we don't actually hear what they're saying. Inconsistent praise, even though it sounds really weird, it works really well. Even though it sounds counterintuitive, there are studies that have shown that when you hoard the resources of praise as a teacher, and then randomly, not consistently, you heap that reward on one person who's doing a really good job. If they know that somewhere down the road, if they keep doing well, they're going to hit the jackpot, it's going to work. I mean, they're going to keep wanting that praise.
Like, who would go to a casino where when you don't hit a jackpot, you're like, it says something mean to you, or like it hurts your feelings? Who would go to a casino?
Yeah.
When
You shouldn't be here. You're wasting your time. It's important to discipline or correct students in private. And on the opposite side of that, while you're correcting your students in private, you praise them in public.
Why do you suppose a high density of weeds can affect the way other plants grow?
It takes up space.
And probably sunlight and the water supply.
The benefits that you get from journaling regularly and about your day, like I've always thought
This is
that,
teachers journaling about themselves.
I think that teachers at the end of a school day, everybody's got 15 minutes. If you don't have 15 minutes to reflect about your day, then I don't know. I have some concerns. about how you really feel about your day. Maybe you're doing it already on your drive home. Why not just write it down and have a record that you can look to, right? I mean, I understand that every teacher I guarantee probably goes home thinking about work. But what I'm talking about is actually dedicating 15 minutes to just freehand, just write whatever's on your brain. You might run over 15 minutes, but what that's going to do is when your students journal, it's going to help them mold the classroom and the lessons and tailor to their needs. It helps involve them in their own educational process, and that's very empowering, going back to what you talked about earlier with their needs. And it also shows that, shows your students, shows their parents, it shows your peers that you work with that you care about your students and about their education. And I think that is going to build trust between you and your coworkers, you and your students, and you and the parents. And I think that when people realize that you care that much, when you can go back and flip through and say like, oh yeah, look how far you've come. When I used to talk about this and then you've progressed to this, and it's all because I took the time at the end of the day to write a few things down.
Okay, so why are we doing this? Why is the Transform Classroom so important to us as teachers and to our future classrooms?
Well, you know, as teachers, we keep the door open. That door is a door for opportunities so that the students are less compelled to drop out and they can remain more engaged.
And the students participate more. They're not sitting in their seats or their desks. They're up moving around. They're getting engaged. They want to be there. It's fun. It's a good environment.
Really, we're creating happy students.
That's the point, right?
Yeah.
The happy students enjoy coming to school. They look forward to it. We're providing them an environment that feels safe to them.
And happy students make for happy teachers.
Well, yeah, I would say so. The steps that we're taking to transform the classroom landscape, these are proven to work.
Well, they're proven to work in basic cognitive development across ages, in community development, especially since the classes are more engaged in their communities, and the social development of the school itself. So by having a Transform Classroom, you are essentially doing your teacher's part to try and solve the world's problems. However, there's no perfect solution.
That's right.
But these are steps that we can take in the right direction.
Absolutely. I think that no teacher should have a goal in mind that they're going to have the perfect classroom, because that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But all we can do is just say that maybe we've got the best, most progressive classroom in our school, and that people are looking at us as leaders at some point from adopting these philosophies and principles.
To summarize, we begin to transform the landscape of classrooms by first developing meaningful relationships with the students, parents, other teachers, members of the school support staff, and the community as a whole.
Also, by providing well thought out instruction that is guided by the CREED standards.
And to understand and satisfy the needs of all members of the classroom, including yourself. Use Vito's 5 needs as a guide.
Know what assets and issues that a community has and how they can help enrich the classroom.
Cultural and linguistic differences need to be acknowledged and creatively used as assets for student learning, as this will help build trust between you and your students.
Allow students, parents, and the community to share power and voice with you. Become a trusted community leader.
Understand what biases you bring into the classroom by becoming more self-reflective. Journaling and discussions with students and fellow teachers will help you to understand yourself better. Analysis of lessons before and after their implementation should be an ongoing practice throughout your career.
Adams.
Here.
Adamley.
Here.
Adamowski. Adamson.
Here.
Adler.
Here.
Anderson. Anderson.
Here.
Bueller. 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 Bueller.
He's sick.